us after or contact us. Thank you. Good to know. All right, let's start this. First, this is something that the board just adopted, the San Francisco Heritage Board of Directors, and it's a land acknowledgement. We're very excited to be doing this. We acknowledge that San Francisco Heritage stands on the unceded ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone, the original inhabitants of the San Francisco Peninsula, and an integral and active community in the Bay Area and beyond. Heritage affirms their sovereign rights as First Peoples and pays our respects to the ancestors, elders, and relatives of the Ramaytush community. We are very grateful, by the way, to work with the American Indian Cultural District, who've helped us with this and who are leading efforts to preserve and share American Indian cultural heritage here in San Francisco. And we join with them to honor these ancestral grounds that we are gathered upon and to support the resilience and strength of all Indigenous peoples. That's the first time I think we've done the land acknowledgement. So it's kind of fun for us to have that actually adopted and us able to say it. So it's great. And then along those same lines, earlier this year, the Heritage Board of Directors adopted an equity resolution. And it's about prioritizing equity, racial and social equity in everything Heritage does. And I just want to bring this up now because as we talk about everything that we're doing in programs and advocacy at the House, at the Doolan-Larson Building, everything we do internally, we think, is this help equity? Does it advance equity? Are we thinking about that? So this is our statement on that. I won't read it. I think we've read it before, but I just want to let you know that it is parcel of everything we're doing. And if you get the Heritage newsletter, you're seeing our report card that we talk about all the things we're doing and what we need to work better on. And also our community voices and other aspects of trying to advance equity. So when we have internal meetings, we always start with equity first. And so the presentation, of course, starts with equity as well. All right, let's get into the nuts and bolts of what's going on at Heritage. I started as the interim president and CEO in December. So it's been a good 6 months or so. And if you attended the semi-annual meeting we had in January, this is what I was focusing on is I think of Heritage as a triangle. There's 3 different areas that we are always working on that we always have to think about in money and in mission. And that is our core advocacy and education work. We'll talk more about that. And then we have 2 historic properties that are very important to what we do and to the potential of Heritage moving forward. The Haas-Lilienthal House, which we've had almost 50 years at 2007 Franklin Street, and the Doolan-Larson Building, which we've had just the last few years on the iconic corner of Haight and Ashbury. So we're going to talk about what Heritage is doing and what we're trying to do in achieving our mission, which is to preserve and enhance San Francisco's unique architectural and cultural identity through this triangle, or this 3-headed monster, as I like to think of it. So first, let's talk about, and I did this when we talked in January. It was a very tough time in January. It's still tough, but let's get the challenges out of the way first. What Heritage is dealing with and how we're navigating these difficult times. So first of all, the challenges, the first one was really money. COVID, because it impacted the rental income that we got through the Doolan-Larson Building and even the apartment over here at the Haas-Lilienthal House, weddings that are being reserved at the Haas-Lilienthal House. Money was severely impacted in 2020 because of COVID. And if you look at this little bar graph, this is just earned income. This is from programs and rentals. And you can see it wow, almost $500,000 that we had a drop in just earned income. So that was primary challenge number one. And you're asking, how are we still here losing $500,000? I'll get into that. That's more of the good news section of tonight. But really difficult. And that was a significant financial hit that we had to face and was a big challenge in 2020 and going into 2021. Another challenge, our capacity was very stretched. Mike Bueller left us, and then we also lost our vice president of development, or advancement as we call it here, Deb Larson. So we were kind of stretched just in people, but we still had all the work. There were still historic resources being threatened. There were still communities that were kind of under siege because of COVID, legacy businesses that were facing closure. They needed us, they needed Heritage to help, and we were very stretched. Of course, because of COVID and the economy, a lot of people had economic or personal issues that they had to deal with on the board and the staff. So just a tough time, just as it is for everybody. So that was another big challenge that we faced even through the first 6-7 months of 2021. And this is the way I think of it, that another challenge that's less, physical or tangible is this sense of uncertainty with no permanent CEO yet, and you still have me kind of as a short timer or an interim person, and losing some of the staff, with some of the board being very stretched thin in their own lives. It was difficult to plan. It's kind of hard to figure out what the rest of the year will bring us, as we all know, with the Delta variant, and we're not sure about masking requirements, and can people book their wedding here in October, or will it be canceled? You know, all this uncertainty makes it very difficult for us moving forward just to plan and to know what we're going to face in 2022 and how to really address issues like money and how effective we can be on our mission. So those are the challenges. Get those out of the way to start. Let me go to the good news. This is what I did in January too. First of all, we had that almost $500,000 deficit. People stepped up. We had some significant donations from individuals to help. We had granting organizations step up. The federal government, God bless it, really saved our bacon this year. The PPP grants, the loans, all those things are keeping us afloat. And it was great. And just like manna from heaven to have those things keep us going. The other thing is the members, the community, the sort of Heritage family, like I call it, really came forward to help us make our 50th anniversary soiree drive-in a big success, not only in just recognizing our first half century of existence and celebrating that, but also financially, just kind of stepping up to make sure that we had a successful soiree. And that was very uncertain. You know, we didn't know if we could come together in person. We had this drive-in model, we had a virtual model, kind of a hybrid. It was all like new ground for us, and it was very exciting to have it all come together. And if you don't have the booklet, this 84-page publication on Heritage's history, it's for sale on the website sfheritage.org. We're just selling it at cost, really, because we want to get our history out to everybody. So look for that on sfheritage.org. And plus, watch the mini documentary if you haven't. It's in 4 chapters. It's on our YouTube channel, and you can get to it through the website as well, sfheritage.org. So the other good news is the staff and the board really stepped up and adapted. You know, we're all working at home. We all have our personal challenges. We're all doing more and things that aren't in our job description just to kind of fill the holes. And I will have to say it's because the staff is so dedicated to Heritage's mission, and the board is so invested in the importance that Heritage has in the city, and especially in these challenging times. Everybody's done double duty and really kind of filled the gaps of what our capacity issues were. So that was really great. And the real good news is there is a new CEO on the way. We don't know who that is yet, but interviews are, I've been told, are going to start in August, so this next month. And they hope to have a new leader on board, identified, and coming on to help us sometime this fall. So I think we're getting closer to that. There was some hiccups kind of on the way in doing the search. Again, COVID, all these things. But now I think we're actually making some progress, and we're going to get there soon. So that's very exciting. All right, let's move into the three-headed monster head by head, the Hydra. So the Haas-Lilienthal House. So much of the Haas-Lilienthal House, it's used for programming and events, and we really couldn't have that. It also brings in income. There's an apartment back here that is rented. There are weddings and people have events here. All those things were really put on hold during COVID, and they haven't quite come back. Some things have and some haven't. We have started tours again, And Pam Larson, who's our volunteer coordinator, has got the docents back. People are showing up for tours. It's great. It's so exciting to have people back in the house. We don't quite have the tourists that are coming from, international and from across the country yet. So we're not quite up to the regular level, but the docents, thank you so much. The volunteers who have been with us for so many years are back, and we're very excited to have them. We don't know if the school tours or the heritage hikes are going to come back in the fall, because the school district and in-person learning and all those things are up in the air. And then the rentals for the weddings and such are slow right now. Although I did get some good news from our house manager, Heather Kraft, that a couple of bookings have been done for November. But it's a little slow. We're not sure if Mayhem Mansion is going to happen in October, there's just a lot of uncertainty, right? We don't know what all the regulations are going to be. So Haas-Lilienthal House is coming back, but it's probably lagging a little behind the other two aspects, and mostly it's because of COVID. And I guess the one thing I would say just in this role is the Haas-Lilienthal House has always been a source of great potential for the organization that I think a lot of people feel it still has more to give, not just in bringing money to the organization, but in programming and how best to use this incredible asset. I think there's still a lot of room to grow. And I think that will be something we look forward to, is figuring out how to make the Haas-Lilienthal House do all it can to achieve Heritage's mission. But it's getting better. Things are getting better. So very good on that score. Even a little better, I would say, is the Doolan-Larson Building. And this is really helping us in two ways right now. One is people are coming back to retail. People are walking up and down Haight Street all the time right now. Crowds are coming, they're hitting the shops. It's helping all our retail tenants there on the ground floor. And it's very encouraging. We have a new tenant on the corner of Haight and Ashbury. It's called Haight Ashbury, the store, and it's very attractive and it's doing really well. So that big hit we took on rental income, we're thinking is turning around, and we're very encouraged. One of the storefronts we're actually reserving for pop-ups and creative use and even heritage events. We're thinking we might be trying to do some architectural tours out of it, other ideas with other nonprofits and partners. So that's kind of fun and exciting on a programming level to be having a presence on the street heritage itself, and maybe working with some artists on using that space. The other big aspect about the Doolan-Larson Building that's just been booming and very exciting for everybody is the Artist in Residency program, which is sort of almost started and bloomed on its own without us really trying. So many artists are using the upstairs residence they want to come in, they want to try to think about the corner of Haight and Ashbury and the counterculture, about San Francisco heritage, not just the organization, but the idea of heritage in San Francisco, and express it in their own artistic ways. So we had Jeremy Fish, a visual artist there at first. Then we had Benjo Vakis, who was writing the score for the Joe Good Performance Group, who's going to do this multimedia dance performance. And now we've got Jimmy Fails, the actor from The Last Black Man in San Francisco, who's in residence there and is doing some poetry and photo shoots. It's a very exciting idea about using the residence, activating a historic building, interpreting a very important chapter in San Francisco's history, using the Doolan-Larson Building. And I think our key challenge here is to figure out a way to make sure that this burgeoning and exciting new arts center can really advance Heritage's core mission of preservation and how it does that. So we have to be careful. It's wonderful to have artists come in. It's wonderful to have them create and use a historic building and activate it. But it would be even better if it could help other things that Heritage is trying to do to be impactful in the city. So that's kind of our challenge we're going forward, as well as just making sure it's funded so that it is, it can, like I said, it can really reach its potential. Same with the Haas-Lilienthal House. All right, third head of the Hydra is our advocacy and education. So we've been very, very active in this all year. And, like I said, the tourists may not be here, retail could be down, but the mission, the threats to San Francisco's architectural and cultural identity are ever constant and are even like ramped up during COVID and the economic issues that are happening. So we are needed and we are out there. We've been working very closely with supervisors in the planning department on a number of issues. Some are, I guess, more traditional, you might say, heritage issues of advocacy for projects that are being proposed or even demolitions. And others are more proactive about trying to establish, to create landmarks, which provide some protection and celebrate aspects of the city's history. So we've worked very closely on these city landmarks, from the Trocadero Inn in Stern Grove to the Ingleside Sundial, the murals at UCSF, the Lyon Martin House, which you see here, the home of the activists, Del Martin and Phyllis Lyon. We're working very closely with the owner, with the Friends of the Lyon Martin House, GLBT Historical Society, National Trust, to try to see what we can do to make that house an active legacy to those two extraordinary women. Downtown, there's a lot of issues, which I'll talk about in a sec, with Crocker Bank and other places. And we just had a great session on getting City Cemetery, which is where Lincoln Park is today, as possibly the first archaeological landmark in San Francisco. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Other, I guess, what I would think of as advocacy and education projects, such as context statements on the New Deal and the Latino context statement, are kind of in a little bit of a limbo at planning, who is overworked and a little understaffed and underfunded. And we're needing to put a lot of pressure on them to move those context statements along. It's a little disappointing to me personally that they're not farther along. And the other thing is, we had the great Donna Graves come in and work on this National Register Multiple Property document on the Haight-Ashbury. And again, that's also with planning being reviewed right now. These are tools, these are preservation tools that are so important and so useful, but they get caught in the bureaucracy of approvals, really, and they take years sometimes, and it's very frustrating. But it's what we got, and we're trying to push it forward. The other way Heritage is very active is we're in working groups on the citywide survey. We work with the Historic Preservation Fund Committee and the Port of San Francisco. These are the kind of things where Heritage is at the table, and we're continuing to do that, to have our voice, to defend architectural and cultural resources in the city, be the advocate for these places. Let's talk a little bit more about legacy businesses and what's going on downtown, because this is kind of at the forefront of a lot of stuff. Because of COVID, because of changing work patterns, because of housing, a lot of buildings downtown, a lot of historic buildings downtown are being proposed for changes of use. And with that come a lot of issues that we're very sensitive to. So one is the I. Magnin building you see up at the upper left. The current proposal is to add housing to that building. Timothy Pfluger's great sort of modern design. We had a lot of concerns about the window treatments. There's expanding some of the windows on the top floor, kind of breaking up that beautiful grid pattern that Pfluger had established. We also were very concerned about the ladies' powder room, the historic and amazing ladies' restroom lounge on the 6th floor. There's a current proposal to move it down to the 3rd floor. And what does that mean, moving it? Is it going to be intact? How difficult will that be? So there's a lot of questions that we have, and we've expressed. The Planning Commission also has is questioning these things. So it's good. It's getting it out there. The other thing are two important bank buildings, 400 California, which is city landmark number 2, I believe, and 1 Montgomery Street. And they're both being proposed for office use. Not only are there physical changes to these incredible banking temples that we are concerned about and we are like actually highlighting, but also if they're turned into offices, they're just not available to the public. And that is one thing that makes these amazing buildings so significant, is that the public can come in and be awed by them. And if they're offices and they're sort of closed off to the public, it's just a very big problem for Heritage. And we're trying to find ways to work with these project sponsors that if they do become offices, how are they available and interpreted by the general public? On more good news, I guess I would say, is in the lower left, you see 301 Battery Street. We worked very closely with the new owners there to get an easement on parts of the 2nd floor of that amazing building. fireplaces and wainscoting and wood paneling. And so we have a 25-year easement that we have arranged that Heritage holds on that second floor. A lot of activity downtown. I think there's still going to be a lot more. It's going to spike probably just as people try to adjust to the new reality that COVID has created with work and shopping. And can it survive? What is the future of it? Will people be coming downtown for those things? And if not, how do we use these buildings in new adaptations? All right, I think I told you in January and last year, our big advocacy priority was really focused on legacy businesses because they were the most imperiled. These businesses that have been around 30 years, that were on the registry, that of course make San Francisco what it is culturally, all of course very much imperiled by the strictures of COVID. So we worked very hard to help with promoting those businesses, for advocating with them. We had contests on social media. There's a new move to create little pins of neon signs. I'll show you this later, but there's a Trader Sam one that we're working with Neon Speaks to help promote and highlight these businesses. But most of all,
SF Neon folks are on the call.
What's that? Oh, the Neon folks.
Or Randall and Al are
great.
here.
So maybe in the Q&A, we can talk more about these pins. They're going to be pretty cool. But the other thing I think almost more important is we're working in the back and or kind of behind the scenes, you might say, on the supervisors and on city government to make the legacy business registry more valuable to legacy businesses. And to me, that's cash in your pocket. It's great to have marketing, and they do have a new website, which you're seeing up here, some assistance on permits with the city, things like that are great. But I would really rather try to find ways to get cash in the pockets of the businesses that need it. And we did have some success in the budget. Now has an extra 500,000 in it, but with 200 and something legacy businesses, you know, if it was distributed equally, it wouldn't make a big dent. So we're still working on that and trying to encourage using the registry. Like if you're going to give aid to small businesses, start with the legacy business registry. Those are businesses the city of San Francisco has said we value, that make San Francisco a special place. Let's start with giving those businesses the aid, you know, get some prioritization. And then the other thing is there's been a lot of talk and discussion about expanding the legacy business concept with what's been called anchor businesses, which maybe aren't in business as long, but are important to a commercial corridor. And we just want to make sure that it doesn't dilute the benefits of the legacy business registry. But we're very in favor of trying to find ways to honor and support businesses that have been in these neighborhoods for a long time and really are kind of tent posts for their success. All right, I want to give you a quick slideshow on City Cemetery because I just did this for the Land Use and Transportation Committee, and I'm sure a lot of you didn't get to see it. So this is just giving an example of the kind of work we're doing. I gave this presentation for the Board of Supervisors, Land Use and Transportation Committee to encourage landmarking of Lincoln Park, which was the site of the city cemetery. So some of you may or may not know this, much about this, but I'm going to explain it to you. So back at the beginning of San Francisco, when it starts, it had a municipal cemetery. It was Yerba Buena Cemetery, and it was a little triangular plot you can see here circled in red, which was on the edge of the city limits at the time. It's bounded by today's Market Street, Larkin Street, and McAllister Streets. And this was called Yerba Buena Cemetery. And by the 1860s, it was filling up pretty fast. The city was catching up to that land. And the city of San Francisco wanted to use it for the site of a new civic center and city hall, which they did eventually put in there. So what are you going to do with all the people you need to bury? Well, by an act of Congress, the western outside lands of San Francisco were added to the city in 1866. 4 large private cemeteries had already been created around Lone Mountain. When the city decided to have its own municipal cemetery reservation created, 200 acres in 1868 out at the edge of town. At the time, one road essentially went out there across a bunch of sand dunes. So they thought, okay, we're never going to catch up to this cemetery. It's way out there. So City Cemetery was established in 1870 with the first interments of about 250 people that were moved from Yerba Buena Cemetery to this new land. And in addition to the city and county sections, there were a lot of groups that had sections. So this is an aerial today, and you can see today on the east side is Lincoln Park and the golf course. On the west side is the Fort Miley VA Medical Center. The federal government basically chopped off this section of City Cemetery to create the coastal fortifications and what became Fort Miley. And there hadn't been any burials at that time when the federal government took it in 1893. But City Cemetery gets started and going really on that east side of the plot. And like I said, in addition to the city and county sections, which you can see on the west and in the center there, there were many different congregations and associations and fraternal orders that let or were granted areas of City Cemetery to bury their dead. So in the city and county sections, this is mostly used for indigent dead, people buried at the county's expense. Whereas these other sections, and let me tell you, there were a lot: Chinese, Jewish, German, Japanese, Italian, French, Scandinavian, African-American. These were the Oddfellows, I believe, African-American Order of Oddfellows, Greek, Scottish sections, including a veteran section from the Grand Army of the Republic. Those were the vets who fought on the north side of the Civil War. Knights of Pythias, sailors, merchant seamen. At least 20,000 bodies were buried at City Cemetery between the 1870s and the 1890s. So we have a very diverse population. These are the working class people who essentially built San Francisco, who are interred over here at City Cemetery, now Lincoln Park. Now, just as with the former Yerba Buena Cemetery, the city started catching up to it, the growth started imperiling City Cemetery pretty quick. It's valuable real estate, right? So these new large burial grounds were established in Colma, and the whole idea was to have everybody be buried down there. And as early as 1887, people were talking about turning City Cemetery into a park. New burials in the city were banned by Ordinance 25 at the very turn of the 20th century, around 1900. And in 1909, the city does it. It decides that it's going to turn City Cemetery into Lincoln Park and gives the various associations who use the grounds 6 months to move their buried members out of City Cemetery. It's funny, the city and county, though, didn't feel it was necessary to move the thousands of bodies that it had buried over the years, deciding to leave those individuals under the ground of this new park. And, you know, mostly economically disadvantaged, these people are still there today. And they never had more than a simple wooden cross as a marker. And now they have really no marker in Lincoln Park. So anyway, you can see in this last clipping on the right, although there were objections, the ruling attitude at the time, the public opinion, was reflected in newspaper headlines like this that said, "The dead must not be permitted to injure the living." Progress. So some bodies were removed by the association, but on an ad hoc basis over the next decade or so, and all the fences, caretaker cottages, gates, markers, any cemetery-related infrastructure was removed for the creation of Lincoln Park and the golf course. Except there are two notable structures that were left in place for mostly unknown reasons and remain there today amid the fairways and the greens. So one you can see here is on the left. Let's talk about that. This structure was erected and used by the Gong Chao Benevolent Association for ceremonies and offerings for their deceased members. The Chinese script that you can see written above there refers to this as a temporary resting place before the bones of the dead were sent to the home village in China. This was a ritual that was essentially done by the Chinese Association. So the individuals were buried and then their bones were later exhumed and sent back to China to be with their ancestors and their families. I recently had the pleasure to meet a descendant of the gentleman who helped purchase the section of the Gong Chao Benevolent Association in City Cemetery. It was very neat. But anyway, this is still here. Nearby is an obelisk, which is now in a section of working sailors, which was sponsored by a charity called the Ladies Seamen's Friends Society. This shaft is adorned with nautical reliefs and has a dedication to the charity's founder, who was Mrs. Rebecca Lambert. Still there, hanging out on the foggy golf course when I took the picture. The most significant reminder, though, of the city cemetery and the almost 30-year history of it is the tens of thousands of San Franciscans who are still lying underground. The remains often come to light when, well, both through natural processes and through infrastructure work or maintenance work. Notably, some 900 bodies were uncovered when the Legion of Honor, the California Palace of the Legion of Honor Museum, did its earthquake seismic retrofit and renovation in 1993 and 1994. There are so many markers, plaques, memorials, public art of all kinds in Lincoln Park, touching on notable individuals and events, including the Holocaust and World War I, the creation of the Lincoln Highway, which was an early 1920s automobile highway. There's things about golfers, but outside of these two structures, mostly hidden on the golf course, there is nothing in the park interpreting city cemetery or commemorating the more than 20,000 San Franciscans still at rest there. So we thought it was important to really push this landmarking, and it got through the Land Use and Transportation Committee. So many diverse and different organizations who are descendant organizations of the associations that had plots there, or just are excited about recognizing the diverse populations that are in there, have come forward to support this landmarking, and the Board of Supervisors approved it on Tuesday. There's still a few more steps in the process, and planning has to do its work to really document what this means, what the features are of the landmarking. But it's exciting. It's the kind of show, it's a good example of how we do incorporate equity in what would be traditional preservation work. Just hitting all these different populations and really thinking about something that is not a traditional building or mansion, but an archaeological landmark that represents working class people. All right. Along with advocacy, we of course have our programs, and we're very excited to use the cultural districts, which is, there's a number of them now in San Francisco, to really kind of have an influence and use preservation as a tool to help strengthen the communities that are here today. So we're working very closely with the American Indian Cultural District. We help them with, we do website posts, we help them with research on sites that they might want to highlight or be part of their context statement. And what's very exciting about working with the American Indian Cultural District is we have to use a different method. You know, we can't use traditional preservation methods because so much of indigenous culture is not about a site or in documenting things through primary sources that are with sort of traditional European Western culture. You have to talk to the elders and you have to talk to the community about the story. So we're almost creating a fresh way to talk about preservation and to create a context statement. So it's very exciting to be working with planning and the American Indian Cultural District on that. Also, Supervisor Gordon Marr has put forward this new Chinese Cultural District in the Sunset District, and Carrie's been working very hard, all the community groups in the supervisor's office to get that off the ground. And then in general, we try to promote the work of all the cultural districts, including Japantown and other places, promote what they're doing, highlight what they're doing, and try to find ways to partner with them in the future. It's a great preservation tool because the cultural districts ensure that the city is focused on a neighborhood, on a community, and as part of that, the history, the buildings, the sites that are important to that community are in some sense protected just because they're given the attention, and landmarking things and stuff like that can come out of this. So we're using the cultural districts and very excited to do so. Lastly, you know, we announced a big program last year, the new program Heritage in the Neighborhoods, and COVID kind of knocked us back on our capacity, but we still went through the Excelsior, the Parkside, and the Marina districts last year. And those groups still continue and the work still goes on. We're going to Visitation Valley in October. So if you're interested in Visitation Valley, you want to know more, or you live there, or you have history there, please reach out to us. We're going to highlight it all month of October in our newsletter online. We're going to go out there tomorrow, actually, Carrie and I, to meet with a bunch of community members out there to talk about planning that. And then the Parkside group, Parkside Heritage, not only is the Trocadero going through landmarking, but we're going to have a Zoom meeting just to kind of regroup, maybe think of a new project, a new thing to work on August 11th. So if you want to join that at 6 p.m., let us know. And the Marina District, we're going to have a little walking tour. We thought it'd be nice to walk around, look at some of the assets of the neighborhood, and maybe have a coffee chat. So again, if you want to join us for the Marina District Heritage Neighborhoods, we're going to do that on August 28th in person. We'll give you our contact info, but you have Carrie's email down here at the bottom. We'd love to have you if you're interested in that neighborhood and you want to help. All right. There's a lot to talk about, isn't there? And I feel like it's just me talking and talking and talking. But here's our contact info for Carrie and I. Please, we want to hear from you if you don't want to ask the question right now or you don't want to share it in chat. These are our emails. These are our phone numbers, all our social media to follow everything we're doing. But really, I just wanted to give you a quick overview, although that wasn't that quick, on what we're doing and where we stand. And let's open up the floor and have a conversation about any of this or whatever else you'd like to talk about.